my name's Anya Lynch and I'm the CEO of the National Parents Council Primary. And you're very welcome to this session in our Let's Talk series. And we tonight have Laura Berry, who's a Special Education Needs Officer with the National Council for Special Education, and she's been in her role since 2008 in both Clonmel and Kilkenny, having responsibility for specific schools, primary, post-primary and special schools within these geographical areas. As a Special Education Needs Officer, she works with schools to support them with the allocation of additional supports to children with special education needs. And she and her colleagues are also available to discuss any concerns that parents of children with special education needs have about the present or the future educational needs of their children. So I'm going to hand over to Laura shortly. Laura's going to talk for about 15 or 20 minutes, and she's also got a presentation that she's going to show us. As well as that, then we will have an opportunity for questions and answers. And at the right hand of your screen, there's a purple button at the bottom that says ask a question. So if you want to put any questions in there, it's only the people in the National Parents Council that will see those questions. They're not public. So we'll be able to look at those questions and put them to Laura when she finishes her talk. So I'm going to hand over to Laura now, and we'll be back with you shortly.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you very much for giving up your time this evening to tune into this information share. We have a PowerPoint presentation tonight. Now, I don't have control of that, so I will have to bark next at Anya every time I want her to move on. So please forgive me for that. But look, let's start. As I said, my name is Laura Berry and I am a Special Educational Needs Organiser, and I work for the National Council for Special Education, or the NCSE. This information session this evening is designed for parents of children with special educational needs who may be transitioning to primary school next September, whether that's mainstream school, special classes or special school. So really the hope this evening is that, this session will give you some idea of the educational supports that are available to your children in school, the additional educational supports that are available in schools, and how these supports can be made available to your school. Next, please, Anya. So as I said, I know that really that's what you would like to hear this evening is, the educational supports that may be available for your children and how schools make them available to you. Before I head into that information, I just want to give you kind of some context about the NCSE and the roles of the personnel who work within the NCSE. Next, please, Anya. So, the NCSE is there to support schools. It's to support schools, via the three pillars of personnel that work within the NCSE. Special educational needs organisers like myself, the visiting teacher service, that's teachers for children who are deaf or hard of hearing, or who have a visual impairment, or our specialist advisors who are there to provide support to teachers who are supporting students. So all in all, we are there to support schools, to support children who have special educational needs or additional needs. We're also here to support parents and to be available to parents to clarify points of information about additional supports that are in school. Like that, we provide information sessions like this on an annual basis, particularly for those children who are in those transition periods between preschool and primary school and secondary school, etc. Next, please, Anya. I suppose it's worth just mentioning before I move on as well that in the last 9 months, no more than everybody else, the NCSE has been through some adjustments in the way that they've had to manage their service provision. We have continued to be available for the last 9 months, on phone, by email, etc. The NCSE has improved their website service as well, and it would be worth your while actually going onto the website www.ncsc.ie, to see a number of new resources and videos, etc., that are there for both parents and schools to access information. You'll also find on the website contact details of all of the CNOs nationwide, whether they're in Kilkenny, where I'm based, or in any other area. There are 70 CNOs across the country, and all of the details and contact details are on that website. Next, please, Anya. So the local teams, as I said, I am a CNO working in Kilkenny. I am part of the Southeast team, and that team consists of special educational needs organisers, visiting teachers, and the specialist advisors. And all in all, as I've already mentioned, our role is there to support schools and to support families, but each of us have distinct roles within the organisation. As a CNO, I am one of 70 CNOs that are based in local offices around the country. Our role really is to support schools with the allocation of additional resources that are provided by the Department of Education and Skills. So the Department of Education and Skills provides additional supports through their special education teacher scheme. So all schools will have a special education teacher or teachers, depending on their size. Through the allocation by the Department of S&As to schools. We also deal with applications for specialist technology for children who are, have disabilities or are visually impaired or are hard of hearing, deaf or hard of hearing. We are involved in the transport scheme for children to and from special classes, special schools. And we are also instrumental in the establishment of special classes at a local geographical level. The visiting teachers service is there for, as I said, we have visiting teachers for children who are deaf or hard of hearing, or we have visiting teachers for those children who are visually impaired. The visiting teacher service works again with schools who have children who are enrolled in their school who are deaf, hard of hearing or visually impaired. They also work with families, and often they are involved with families from the get-go, from the diagnosis of the child with visual impairment or deaf or hard of hearing from birth. So they are an all-encompassing service. They deal with schools again around how best to educate children who are deaf or visually impaired, the specialist technology that is required, and making recommendations for that specialist technology, and in the use of that technology in schools. And finally, the NCSC's specialist advisors for teachers are available to schools who require support around children who have additional needs. And that's through a referral service, again through our website. So that's just a very, very brief overview of the support teams that work at a local level around the country, and who work together collaboratively to try and support children with special educational needs in schools. Anya, next please. So what additional supports or educational supports are there for children with special educational needs? So what I'm going to just talk about here is the roles of school staff and I suppose the expectations on those staff within a school, and what their individual remits are in supporting children with special educational needs. So firstly, you'll see in that first pillar there where we have and we understand, all of our children who are going to mainstream schools, who have the class teacher, who are enrolled in the school and are in junior infants, and they know the name of their teacher. So the teacher is responsible for every student in her class, irrespective of need. So those who have additional educational needs, the class teacher is responsible for every child, irrespective of whether they have educational needs or not. It is the class teacher's primary responsibility to educate your child. If your child has additional needs, whether they be educational needs or whether they be needs arising from behaviour or a sensory impairment or a physical disability, etc., and they are struggling with either accessing the curriculum. It is the responsibility of the class teacher to understand those needs and respond to those needs by differentiating the curriculum, or indeed differentiating the environment so that the child can access learning appropriately. And of course, as we understand, it is the class teacher's remit, overall remit, to monitor the progress of every child in her class or his class, including those who have a special educational need. Secondly, here now, we're going to talk about the special education teachers. So again, the Department of Education and Skills front loads schools with additional special educational teaching hours. So every school will have access to a special education teacher, and many schools have a number of special educational teachers depending on the size of the school. The special education teacher works alongside the class teacher to complement their work, to work in tandem with what they're doing for children who have special educational needs. So as we can see there in the graphic, the special education teachers, they work with some students, those students who have the highest level of needs in the school. They will have additional needs, whether those additional needs be academic, whether they be related or arising from another special educational need. They will work to determine what those needs are, and they should respond appropriately to those needs. Again, they will differentiate to suit the needs or the presenting needs of each individual child. And they, alongside the class teacher, will monitor that progress. So some children may need access to the special education teacher several times a week across the year. Other children may only need access to the special education teacher for a short period of time, once a week, for 6 weeks, and it will be reviewed, and it should be reviewed regularly. And thirdly there, the special needs assistant, another additional support or allocation that the department makes to schools. It's important to note that the special needs assistant is not a teacher, and that they are there primarily to assist the teacher in addressing significant primary care needs of a child over and above what the classroom teacher or the special education teacher can address. So again, we're looking at that pillar where we're saying only some students have very significant primary care needs that require the assistance of an SNA. And we have to make it very clear that these are care needs as opposed to educational needs, because it is the teacher and the special education teacher who have primary responsibility to address the educational needs of a child. So the SNA is there to assist the teacher in addressing care needs and care needs only. They will, of course, support and monitor the progress of that child over time. So we may well have a child who has care needs that are across the day and are enduring for a long time and are unlikely to diminish. And then we will have a child who may present in a school with care needs, who may need access to care support, maybe because they have toileting needs, etc., or a medical need at that point in time. But those needs may diminish over time, and therefore the SNA is no longer required because their needs are not significant anymore. So again, it is an ongoing monitoring of progress, setting targets for independence and development, and monitoring that over time to see when the child, or if the child, can be relinquished of that requirement for access to an SNA. Next, please, Anya. So really, when children arrive in primary school, and if they do have additional needs, additional learning needs, or additional care needs, it is a whole school response. It is determining, what is the right level of support in school that each child requires, the child that has additional needs. Is it that the child needs a high level of support, or is it that they just need a level of support for a short period of time? Can that support be provided by the classroom teacher alone? do we have to get the special education teacher involved as well? You know, what are the goals that we need to set? So the first step there, as we can see in the graphic, is identifying the needs of the child, and that is a school responsibility. And they can identify the needs sometimes before a child arrives in school, if there are professional reports and guidance that it is, you know, it is possible to have an idea of the child that is transitioning to the school and identify some of the needs. The second step then is, in identifying the needs, it's setting out the goals, or, you know, how are we going to approach that? You know, how are we going to plan our approach? Again, is it just in-class support or additional support from the teacher? Do we need a special education teacher? You know, do we have to adapt the environment of the classroom? Do we have to make any modifications? You know, if the child is very noise sensitive, you know, how can we prevent the echo in the classroom, etc.? Do we need to have specialist equipment for a child who is deaf or hard of hearing? How do we organise the classroom support to ensure that the child gets the most out of his or her day-to-day, you know, access to education? How do we organise that support? Do we need more than just the teacher and the special education teacher? Is this child presenting with very significant primary care needs? Do we have to allow him access or her access to a special needs assistant because their care needs are such? And then when we have identified the right level of support, schools are required to monitor and record and review progress on an annual, or on a regular basis rather. And this becomes cyclical. It should be done, I suppose best practice should be done, that they look at the needs of the child regularly across the school year and decide whether that level is appropriate, whether they need to increase it or decrease it. So there is a whole school planning approach to getting the right level and the right supports in place. And this is the school's responsibility to do that from the outset. Next, please, Anya. So how does your child get access to these supports? The special education teaching model of support, as I've said already, is front loaded to the school. So the school, in advance of the junior infant cohort starting in September, the school already knows how many hours of additional special education teaching support they're going to have, because the department will have told them this way back in April or May. So they will be given a quantum of hours by the Department of Education, which equates to a number of teaching posts, again, depending on the size of the school. So in advance of the children starting in September, they already know who the children who they have in the school, who they have coming in that may have needs, and they can start to plan from that point as to who may need access to the special education teacher. So that planning process can start very, very early. The Department of Education and Skills intends to front load the quantum of special needs assistance support to schools from September 2021. So at the moment, we are working off what we call an interim arrangement, whereby schools have been given an allocation of special needs assistance and are asked to prioritise those children in their school with the greatest level of care needs and to support those children first. And then, depending on the level of access, to support them either whether it's across the day or whether it's intermittently for, you know, some level of access depending on their care needs. For example, if we were looking at a child who has a medical care need, maybe arising from a medical condition like diabetes, it may be that that particular child might need access to an SNA 2 or 3 times on a scheduled basis a day, because they are, you know, they have to have their bloods checked or they have to have an insulin injection generally at the same time across the day. That SNA may well have to be available in the school environment or building across the day in the event that something were to happen or the child was to have a hypo or a hyper, but it doesn't mean that that SNA has to be with that child all day, every day. They could be deployed at that point in the day to support other children who are presenting with care needs, but they are available to that child. So access to SNA can be intermittent across the day, or it can be more intensive depending on the level of care needs that the child presents with. Up until recently, a child who had access to SNA in a school had to have a diagnosis of a disability. Excuse me. The new model of allocation to schools, the front-loading model, no longer requires a child to have a diagnosis of a disability. What they do have to have is they have to have verified significant primary care needs in order to need or require access to a care supporter who's there to assist the teacher in addressing those care needs. So they have to be identified, they have to be demonstrated, and the school then has to decide how they are going to use their allocation of SNA supports in school to deploy to those children who have the highest level of significant care needs. So in terms of getting the support for your child, the department will have front-loaded your child's school with these supports in advance of them arriving in September. The school now has the responsibility to deploy those supports on a day-to-day basis and to review those supports on a regular basis, again with target setting, etc. And if a child requires it for a short period of time, then that may well be the model of support they put in place, or maybe it will be reviewed at the end of the first term and it will have to continue on, etc. But because a child has access to an SNA as they begin school, it doesn't necessarily mean they need access to an SNA for the duration of their time in school, because as I said, it should be reviewed very regularly. And a child, if they no longer have care needs that are significant, then the school will remove that access to SNA and that access to care support over time. Next, please, Anya.
Just a couple of minutes there.
Yeah.
Laura.
So aside from that, just two other things that I would just wanted to talk about. I'd mentioned before about specialist technology that some children might need, maybe if they are deaf or hard of hearing, or if they're blind, or if they need the use of other augmentative technology. So assistive technology still requires a diagnosis, and those applications come directly to from the school to the CNO. So there has to be a diagnosis of a disability in line with the eligibility criteria set down by the Department of Education and Skills. There has to be a professional recommendation for that equipment, and it has to state that it is essential and it's required throughout the school day, and that without it the child cannot access the curriculum. The CNO gets the application with the professional report and they screen it for eligibility in line with the department's criteria. And then we make a recommendation to the department, and then the department makes the final decision on the funding that will be provided to the school for that equipment. Special transport. So again, those children who are traveling to and from mainly special classes and special schools can get transport to and from school. It is based on a diagnosis, a diagnosed disability, so we still need a diagnosis in a professional report. There has to be a recommendation in the report that a specialised placement in a special class or a special school is required, and the school or the class has to be the nearest with availability to the child's home address. So that application again comes through from the school to the CNO. The CNO again screens it in line with all of that eligibility and makes a report to the Department of Education and Skills, and again they then decide on whether transport is sanctioned or not. Next, please, Anya. So, as your child starts schools, just a quick discussion on the placement options that are available. The majority of children will attend their mainstream local school, and you know, local schools, mainstream schools, as we have just gone through, have been sanctioned, you know, additional supports through special education teachers or SNAs or technology and transport, etc. So children who have got disabilities or additional needs can attend their mainstream classes. And again, they will be, in a class with children, their peer group of their own age. They will have access to their class teacher and an SNA if that is essential because they have significant primary care needs. However, the second option to children who have needs, for example, children who have autism, they could attend a special class if there is one attached to a local mainstream school. These classes are obviously smaller in size. However, the philosophy of the special classes attached to mainstream schools is that a model of integration will be promoted so that your children can be integrated and interact with their peer group. So they start in junior infants, they are a junior infant of that school, but they will also have access to, or if they meet the eligibility criteria for a special class, they can access that class and benefit from the enhanced resources of that class. However, to access a special class, one, you have to have the disability in line with that class, and you have to have a recommendation from a professional that your child has complex needs arising from their diagnosis and they require placement in that class and the reasons why. As I said, for example, in a class for children with autism, they can enroll 6 children. There is 1 teacher allocated to that class and 2 SNAs if they have up to 6. Finally, the final option here is special school. And again, these have smaller class sizes. You have a class teacher and you have baseline resources of SNA support to special schools, depending on the school's disability profile. That will have an impact on the number of SNAs they will have in their school. Again, to access a special school, you will have to have a report confirming the disability that your child has, making a recommendation that they require a special school placement, outlining and stating what their complex needs are and the reasons why they require placement in a special school. Okay, Anya. Just a mention of other key people that you may come across in your child's schooling. The National Educational Psychological Service, or NEPS, these are the school psychologists that that the Department of Education deploy to schools. So each school will have access to a NEPS psychologist and will have an allocation of time each year for the NEPS psychologists to be involved with work that the principal wants them to be involved with. That could be assessment, it could be consultation, it could be support for their teachers. CNOs, will liaise with the NEPS psychologist in terms of their work and their supports for schools. And also we would liaise with our HSE professionals like psychologists, occupational therapists, speech and language therapists, etc., in line with getting the correct supports in place and supporting the school to support your children who have these needs. Anya? So, look, I am aware that this is a whistle-stop tour of these resources, and as I mentioned before, the website, the NCSC website, has many excellent resources that you can click into to get further information on what we have spoken about tonight. The one on the screen there is just one, Preparing Young Children for Primary School, which again probably gives a more in-depth conversation about how to prepare your child and the supports that are available there. So I would encourage you to go onto the website and to navigate the website to see what resources are there to suit what you require and to give you more information about the transition of your child to school. Next, please. So finally, before we go into the Q&A, just to mention that, again, when you are enrolling your child or looking or seeking enrolment for your child, it would be good advice to suggest that you apply to the school in writing, because that way you will get a response in writing as well as to whether they've been offered a place or not. Again, as I said, we work at a local level. We are a network. The CNO cohort is a network of 70 CNOs around the country. Our contact details are on the website. So wherever you live, there will be either 1 or 2 CNOs who are covering that area geographically, and you can contact them. Our phone numbers and our email addresses are on the website for any information that you may want to talk, one-on-one with the CNO. I mean, please invite you to contact us, and we are very, very happy to have those conversations. Thanks, Anya. Next. So look, if any questions, I will try my best to answer. Thank you.
Yes, that's great, Laura. Thank you very much. And I think it's a very comprehensive overview. So I think probably you've dealt with some of the issues that are coming up in the questions, but we'll try and get through as many as we can. So I'll just start with the first one then. My child has additional needs and has a query of ASD. He is currently in preschool and will be starting primary in September. I am told he will need an SNA. How do I go about applying, and when should I start the process?
Okay, so we no longer, as I would have said with this, there are no longer any individual applications for access to SNA. So once you know where your child is going to be going to school and you've had confirmation of that place, then you will be in a position to provide the school with any information that you have. Now, I know you're saying it's query ASD, but it is worth having an open and honest conversation with the principal and, discussing the needs that he is presenting with. Principals often as well will link in with the preschool and gather information that way. And there will be, the MUSH scale, transition plans, etc., that will go across from preschool to primary school. Again, as we said there, it's sometimes the children need to be in school before they can identify what the level of support that is required. However, if a school knows that they have a number of children who are enrolling, who they know and can verify have significant primary care needs, and if they feel that their allocation of SNA support that they have going forward in September is insufficient, the school can make what we call an exceptional review or an application for their allocation to be reviewed under exceptional circumstances, whereby they have to demonstrate that they have insufficient levels of SNA support in the school. And that will be an application that will be dealt with by the CNO. But really, as I said to you previously, it is up to the school to deploy those resources based on who has the highest level of need. So if your child has the highest level of care needs on entry, then the school should be planning and preparing for that and making a plan, having a plan in place to deploy to him as they see fit.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next question then. Are you following the same model as Better Start Agency in early years and the AIM programme, i.e. no diagnosis, but an assessment will be needed by each child requiring assistance?
No, again, as we said, for access to special education teaching hours or the special education teacher and access to SNA support now in schools going forward, a diagnosis is no longer required. And that's why the Department of Education and Skills is moving towards this model of front-loading supports to schools so that they know in advance how much support they have and they can plan and prepare to deploy to children. The difference that I pointed out there is that if your child needs assistive technology or special transport to and from school, we still need a diagnosis of a disability to process those applications still. But no longer is a diagnosis required for access to special education teaching hours or SNA hours. If we go back 5 years ago, that would have been the case. But as I said, we have now moved towards this model of no longer requiring a diagnosis for access to SNA or SET.
Okay, thank you. Just the next question then, Laura. Will my child do better in mainstream? I know it's individual, but how will I know?
I think that's a very difficult one. I mean, first of all, as I would have said there, those children who are enrolled to attend a special class or a special school, they do have to have a diagnosed disability, and they do have to have the appropriate recommendations in line with parental choice, but there has to be a professional recommendation in a relevant professional report that your child requires a special place in either a special class or a special school. And it has to state that your child requires that because they have very complex needs. So if you don't have that information, or if you don't have professionals who are willing to say that or suggest that that is the case, then your option is mainstream with access to the supports that are front loaded to the school. Often parents, again, understandably are very worried and anxious about their child starting school. And we would hear both sides of the coin, where children start school and have a wonderful experience when not expected, and vice versa, children who start school and it doesn't start well for them, and then the process of looking for alternatives starts. But what I would say is that, one, you're not going to access a special class or special school unless you have those recommendations and those clear, definitive complex needs. So that may be something that you have to link in with professionals if you are kind of on the fence about whether your child should be looking towards specialist education at this point in time.
Okay, thank you very much. That's very clear. Thank you, Laura. My child is already enrolled in our local primary school, but once they discovered that she has special needs, they have suggested a different school might be more suitable. Can they do this?
I would say that first and foremost, it is parental choice where your child goes to school. And that's very important, that we send our children to a school of our choice. However, if the people where she's attending school are, and I would hope subtly saying to you, we feel that, we're not meeting her needs. I mean, that's an important thing. And I think that's a question that you would have to have an open conversation with the teacher and the principal. Are you meeting her needs? What have you done? What are, again, going back to what we spoke about there, about that cycle of, interventions, starting with the class teacher, introducing the special education teacher, what are the plans, what are the programs, what are the strategies? Has she got care needs? Does she need access to an SNA? Have you adapted the environment? Has the school looked at doing all these things before suggesting that they cannot meet her needs?
I think, Laura, sorry, I think that this child has been enrolled but hasn't started yet.
Oh, right, okay. So hasn't started, so is starting next September?
Yes.
Okay, well then the school doesn't know that yet. I mean, if no school can turn a child away based on a special educational need, nor should they. This is very important for us. It's a very important message that we should get out there, that, this is the reason why schools are being provided and front loaded with these resources, so that they can plan and provide as best they can. And all schools are provided and front loaded in the same manner. So, I would suggest that, it has to be set at this stage, given that we're only December and it's 9 months away from, a school start, that the planning starts now. And the preparation starts now, particularly as if it is your choice to send your child to the local mainstream school, that it is within their remit to start planning for that entry.
And Laura, as you said before, would it be useful for the parent maybe to contact their local CNO in the area to help support them?
Absolutely, yes. Because that conversation one-on-one, where we can talk about your child this evening, when you ring your local CNO, they will have the time to talk through everything with you. They will probably know the school, they will know their experience and their background, etc. And you may be able to talk, with much more clarity to the CNO about your child's needs, and have that conversation and get that advice. Absolutely.
Okay, that's great, thank you. Just the next question then. Can a school refuse to recognise an SLT, an educational psychologist recommendation? I'm told he isn't the greatest need in the class despite a DLD, dyslexic and anxiety diagnosis.
So sorry again, Anya, just to clarify there. So there's
a lot of information. I'll read it again slowly.
Speech and language, is it speech and language or is it dyslexia?
SLT and educational psychologist recommendation.
Okay, for additional supports.
Yeah.
Okay. I suppose it depends on when the report was done, and often again it is a case of you as a parent have I suppose every right to see what is the teacher doing. First of all, as I said, the class teacher has the primary responsibility to respond and address the needs that your child is presenting with. If it is that you are looking for additional supports through the special education teacher, it is worth having a conversation to ask for the reasons why they don't deem him to be, priority. It is down to the school, as I said, the principal to deploy those supports. And of course, the principal will know who has the greatest level of need. It's not that I would imagine that they are ignoring that, but I think that there should be an education plan in place, that even if that's through the teacher, how is the teacher at that ground level in the classroom addressing that need, and providing you with the direct information as to why they are providing him with that support. They may think from their point of view that he's managing well, in comparison to other children. But I suppose we can't force the school to deploy their supports if they can acknowledge and they can verify that they have children with a greater level of need, because, as I said, it is their responsibility to deploy to the highest level of need in the school.
Okay, just another question then. My child has Down syndrome. What reports should I look for? Some parents are being offered a psychological assessment, but some are not. Is this assessment required?
The assessment, I mean, look, as we said, and if your child is going to mainstream school, we no longer need that diagnosis or information, etc., to access those supports. However, that doesn't mean that the professional reports are not a useful, informative tool for the transition of the child, because they will have detail and information about your child's strengths and weaknesses, which can support the planning and the transitioning of your child into school. If it is a case that you're looking towards a special class or a special school for your child, then you will need that report, and it will be important that the complex needs are outlined, because one, that gives you access or eligibility to attend a special class or a special school, but also then to access things like transport to and from the special class and special school. But again, just to clarify there, if it's a mainstream school, it could be a useful report in order for them to plan and prepare, but not a necessary report.
Okay, and I'll just finish up because I know we're running out of time now, but I'll just finish up with this question. Who provides the diagnostic report for SNA, mainstream or special class or special school?
Well, again, we don't need a diagnostic report for SNA, because again, if you're in a mainstream school and you have primary significant care needs, and the school has already been allocated and front-loaded with that SNA support, based on your child's identified care needs, it is up to the school to utilise their allocation of SNAs to support your child. You don't need a report for an SNA in a special class or a special school, because special classes and special schools already come with baseline supports already pre-allocated to them. So,
but as I think, Laura, sorry, Laura, I think it's where do you get the diagnostic report for a placement in a special class or a special school?
Oh, sorry, not for SNA.
No,
okay,
no, the
sorry.
SNA was the first thing.
Oh, sorry,
and
sorry.
Then it's for the placement in the special class or special school.
So for a diagnostic, that would be through either, it could be a psychologist, it could be a multidisciplinary team through the HSE. It could be a private assessment that you have sourced yourself. So basically, we can accept reports who are from, clinicians like that, multidisciplinary, whether they're private or HSE. But the most important thing is that the diagnosis is very clear, that the recommendation is very clear, that it is very clear and stated that the child has complex needs and the reasons why they need access or to be enrolled in a special class or a special school.
Okay, Laura, I'm going to end it there because we've run over time, but we have got a huge amount of questions in here that we haven't been able to cover. So I presume, obviously, they can ring our own helpline here in the National Parents Council, and we will help as much as possible. Our number is on our website, mpc.ie, but I presume they could also contact their local special education needs officer and talk through some of these particular queries with them. If they don't get through to the CNO, should they leave a message or should they keep trying, or what's usually the protocol? Because obviously
I would suggest if you don't get through, make sure go onto the website, find who your local contact is. The email address is also there. I would ring first and leave a message. If you don't get an answer, I would send a backup email then to the CNO, confirming that you did ring and that you would really appreciate a call back, in relation to your child's start in school, and hopefully your CNO will get back to you as soon as she or he can.
Okay, and likewise with ourselves, the helpline can often be busy, but if you leave a message, we will definitely get back to you within about a 48-hour working day timeline. Laura, can I thank you very much for giving up your time this evening, and thank you everybody for attending. And as I said, if we haven't managed to get through your questions, please do make contact with either ourselves or your local CNO. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good night.
Good night.